Welcome to A Theory of Everything. I'm Luis Razzo. Several years ago, a younger and more naive version of myself gave a TEDx talk on the political implications of a physical theory of everything. As you know, physics is basically about the evolution of a system over time, and a political system in the broadest sense is necessarily a physical system. In a sentence, what physics tells us is that people are not equal, and that giving every person an equal say in establishing the rules of society is a sure way to get all of the wrong kind of people into power. The fact that this sounds like blasphemy doesn't make it any less true. Nature doesn't conform herself to our rules or constitutions. In any case, here's the argument, naively distilled for a general audience.
How do we get the right people into government and keep the wrong people away? In the next 15 minutes, we're going to answer this question once and for all. First, let's analyze a fishing trip. In it, there are two forces at play. The first force is property. If we plot property on a line, we can visualize what we all know to be true. Some people have a lot of it, others less. The second force is charity, and the same principle applies. Some people are very charitable, others less. If we juxtapose these two forces by placing property on the x-axis and charity on the y, we have the start of an interesting analysis. In fact, if we take it one step further, we can chart a great big chunk of political and economic history onto one graph with 4 quadrants. Each of these quadrants corresponds to a different amount of property and charity. Using this graph, take a moment to find where you are now and where you would like to be in the future. As we all know, when it comes to politics, people inevitably divide into 2 camps, left and right. The left camp corresponds to the collectivist quadrant in the upper left. The right corresponds to the individual quadrant in the lower right. This left-right tension is not trivial or coincidental. It precedes politics by hundreds of thousands of years and goes to the very core of our animal and rational nature. Nothing that we've ever done or conceived of in the past has been able to reconcile these 2 conflicting forces. They're like oil and water in the human soul. What's especially troubling at this point in history is that this antagonism persists across countries, cultures, and continents. What humanity desperately needs is a way to transfer this left-right political tension up into the 4th quadrant, which is neither right nor left. It's both and neither. This quadrant is ideal because it brings together powerful economies with a high level of commitment to the common good. The question is, how do we get there? The only viable option, of course, is democracy. But our current democracy has proven itself incapable of getting us there. According to our vision, this is because the model is seriously flawed. The flaw in our current democracy is that in it, all hearts are equal. By that I mean that no matter how much I contribute to the common good, I'm politically equal to everybody else, even if they contribute little or nothing. This flaw is comparable to the flaw in communism, where economies rot because people don't have the incentive to be creative. In democracy, this lack of incentive to work for the common good creates an equally rotten opposite extreme where self-interest pigs out on the common good. Don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with self-interest. It's an integral part of human nature, and it's great for the economy, but it doesn't belong in politics. Just as the carrot of capitalism is individual economic gain, democracy is missing a carrot for individual political gain. Without this carrot, we're working with a sort of communist zombie democracy where somebody who gives everything is equal to somebody who gives nothing. And this imbalance will never function properly. So the solution in 3 steps. First, instead of only one vote, people should have the ability to obtain more votes in proportion to their charity. Second, we can measure charity by counting the fish that a person brings to the common table. And third, since fish are not easy to carry around, we propose voluntary taxes as a more practical way of measuring charity. The incentive we are proposing then for democracy is additional votes in exchange for higher voluntary taxes. In a minute, you'll see the absolutely tectonic effect that this will have on our social, economic, and political systems. Now, I know this is all very shocking, so I'd like to take a couple of steps back and ease you out of your shock by reviewing three basic premises on which our model is based. The first premise is that democracy has not finished evolving. In the first democracy, voting rights were limited to a defined group of men. Since then, democracy has evolved to include everybody. This gives the impression that we've reached a limit, that there's no more evolving to do. In reality, democracy is part of a much larger evolutionary process that started billions of years ago and will continue for many more. To insist that our current model of democracy represents the absolute crowning achievement of human statecraft and that it will never get any better is fitting only for the mind of a drunken Neanderthal. That's our first premise. Our second premise is that human hearts are not equal. People are equal in freedom, human rights, dignity, and many other important ways. But when it comes to charity, we certainly aren't equal. We're all familiar with Gauss's bell curve. In politics, we are foolish to ignore the bell curve of human hearts. That's our second premise. A third premise is that competition produces elites. This is a mathematical law that's built into the very nature of the universe, and it applies to every area of human activity. In business, for example, perfect competition favors the most innovative and efficient companies. In the Olympics, likewise, competition produces world-class athletes. If we incentivize competition for the common good, we can count on the rise of a similar elite group of competitors. So let's review. Democracy is not finished evolving, human hearts are not equal, and competition produces elites. The voluntary tax proposal stems logically from these three premises. If we want to fix politics, we believe that we must allow democracy to evolve, embrace the unequal human heart, and enable an elite group of politicians to arise through voluntary taxes. At the heart of our proposal is a very individualistic incentive, the incentive that's missing from our current democracy. An incentive that says, if you give more, you get more. And this incentive is founded on the principle that true power, lasting power, the kind that transcends space and time, comes from service. When you combine these abstract principles and bring them into the world of politics, you get the voluntary tax formula. This formula can incorporate a wide array of macro and microeconomic factors, but the essence will always be very simple. The more you give and the longer you give, the more votes you get. The result of competing for power along these lines is that just as in capitalism, bigger fish eat smaller fish, and we get better products and services for lower prices, so in politics, bigger hearts engulf smaller hearts, and we get better politicians and lower taxes. This upward pressure for bigger fish and bigger hearts will lead the planet inevitably into the right corner, exactly where we want to be, beyond petty partisan politics and divisive political ideologies, into thriving economies that work for the common good. If you followed me so far, what you should see is a very healthy balance between the self-interest of capitalism and a new, more highly evolved model of democracy, all founded on a very firm foundation of individual freedom. So what if you don't want to pay voluntary taxes? I think this is one of the strengths of the model. It's built on the dignity and freedom of every person. In our model, politicians will be highly competitive individuals who have taxed themselves at the highest rates for the longest times. These individuals will not be bought by corporations, nor will they be envious of your wealth or anxious to redistribute it, either to banks or to poor people. It's your money. By the same token, if you're poor, you'll know that politicians are working hard, using their own money to create employment and or volunteer opportunities for you. Our proposal is fundamentally sound because it encompasses the whole human person, the individual side and the collective side. It's so firmly rooted in this human wholeness that there are no valid objections from anybody, anywhere, at any point on the political spectrum. Ladies and gentlemen, we've reached a critical juncture in our evolution as a species. Our current political systems are incapable of responding to the profound complexities of globalization, not to mention the deeper questions of existence, with the best interests of everybody in mind, and certainly not thinking about the weakest and most vulnerable among us. The voluntary tax model responds to this predicament by inviting, but not forcing, men and women, rich and poor, from all walks of life and from every corner of the planet, to compete for political power by working for the common good. In return for the sacrifice, the model grants the most competitive among us the right to lead our cities and nations with the political authority that victory over self-interest deserves. This is no pipe dream. Our proposal is concrete, doable, compelling, and universal. It seems fitting then to come full circle and close with our opening question. How do we get the right people into government and keep the wrong people away? Today we have the answer. Thank you very much.